The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio with Dr. Alex Heublein and Dr. Josh Klapow. This is Adapt or Perish.
Welcome to Adapt or Perish, along with Dr. Alex Heublein, president of Adaptogen. I am Dr. Josh Klapow. And Alex, we have emails. I don't know that everybody knows this, but people who've been listening to our shows can send us emails. All they need to do is go to info@tonykurre.net and you can shoot us emails. And so we got some that came through. And as you were saying, thought it might be a good idea if we try to cover some of them today, because they're definitely different. I took a look at them. They're definitely different. Then the topics, the topics are similar, but I love the way that they're phrased, and that may help us sort of go down some different alleys. Does that sound cool with you?
I love it. Let's do it, man. Yeah, it's always fun to get listener feedback and talk about things that are top of mind for our listeners. So yeah, I think this is a great episode.
Okay, cool. Let's go start with this first one. The first one says, I'm a small business owner. I have employees who work remotely. I'm trying to ramp up into this whole, quote, hybrid work approach. How do I keep people productive? And what kinds of technology solutions are out there to help me with that? It's driving me bananas. Yeah. I was just thinking like this person is a small business owner, and small business owners and large business owners. And I think anyone probably over 4 employees, would you say, is trying to figure out hybrid working. And let me pose this question to you, because you work with a lot of companies that are, national and multinational. And one thing that I have noticed since we sort of coined the term hybrid working is that there are a lot of companies where hybrid working and even just almost completely remote working has always been the norm or has been the norm for a long time, long before COVID. So just, the idea of hybrid is new to some, but not to others. So what are your initial thoughts and sage advice for our listener?
Well, yeah, you're right. This is one of those very timely and almost ubiquitous topics right now. Maybe I'll answer it from the perspective of what we kind of did at Adaptogen, and then maybe we can talk about some of the other things that we've seen, because we're also a small business. We have employees that work remotely. And we are also trying to ramp up this whole hybrid work approach. So I think this one actually is really relevant. And so maybe I'll share a few things that we've observed and some of the things that we've tried. Some of them have worked. Some of them are still a work in progress. I think there's a couple of key things, right? One of the biggest fears of remote work by executives, business owners, whether they're small, medium, large business owners, you see this in the press a lot. They're worried about worker productivity, right? Like if people are working from home, how do I know that they're actually working versus playing golf or, sitting around doing nothing, playing video games or something. And I think, I think on the surface of it, that's a common and natural and I think legitimate fear. And we've certainly seen circumstances where, there were remote employees that were kind of pretending to work. And I think that, Elon Musk has gotten into a lot of trouble over the last couple of weeks for some of his comments on that. Yeah. But, I think there's a couple of things to realize there when it comes to productivity. One of them is, and I saw a great meme or something like that out on social media the other day. And it was, the executive saying, well, I need to know that my people are working. And the other person says, well, are you getting the right business results? And he's like, yeah. What are you worried about? Right. I mean, if you're getting the right results, productivity is less of a factor. Right. But I think there's this fear that, people left to their own means will not do their jobs. But, if you have the right metrics in place and you have the right measurement systems in place, it's pretty easy to detect those situations. And then deal with them appropriately. So if the work's not getting done and the results aren't coming in the way you think they should or that you forecasted for, having the right tools in place to really be able to give you the right metrics. And I'm not talking about metrics like, some of these companies have decided, well, we're going to put keystroke loggers on our laptops of our employees. And that's a terrible idea. Right. I mean, if you have to do that, you've hired the wrong people. I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like you have to monitor your people. And it's particularly true of information workers and knowledge workers. If you've got to go to that extent, you have probably done a poor job of hiring people that are motivated to get the job done and to contribute to the company, right? So I think that's the first thing, right? You need to have metrics in place, and you need to have the ability to measure productivity, measure progress, but it's really all about outcomes, right? A lot of people get focused on output. How many lines of code did this developer write, or how many marketing calls did the marketing department make, or whatever. But what you really need to be focused on is outcomes. And I think that's true not just in remote work environments. I think that's true in every business. Too many people get hung up on measuring outputs versus outcomes. And really, it's all about outcomes, because that's what you really care about as a business owner or an investor in a business or a leader in a business. You care about, well, what outcomes are we achieving for the company? What outcomes are we achieving for our partners? And maybe most importantly, what outcomes are we achieving for our customers? So I think that kind of focus on outcomes over output is really, really important in this whole discussion. Yeah.
Okay. So the psychologist is going to jump in, because I agree with you completely. But here's what I see. And I see this all the time. Yes. If you're leading a company, you want to look at outcomes. No, you shouldn't be in a position where you're looking at keystrokes. Yes, if the job is getting done, why are you worried about essentially where it's getting done? And for me, what I see in leaders, Alex, is literally their own angst, their own anxiety. It's to the point where if I, as a leader, can see my people or see some proxy of my people who are working for me, then somehow I will know that things are getting done. Now it's veiled a lot of times in the idea about culture and interaction. And maybe we can talk about that in a minute, because I do think communication becomes an issue when there's hybrid. But more times than not, that idea of that people need to be together, or we need to actually see people work, is driven, I would say, almost 100% by the unknown to the leaders of the company. Because the data has been presented to them time and again. Look, your people are hitting the marks. Well, it's always, and then I think the other piece that comes up, right? Oh, by the way, my whole thing around, if you say something, a comment to anybody, and their response is, then instantly you've won the argument, because they don't have anything to go on. That's a complete difference. But the other thing that I see too, and maybe you can talk about this one, is there is this argument that if I can't see folks and, see or have some proxy to track them, and we are getting things done, is it possible that they could be working more? Like if they're, instead of sort of a capitated payment model, if they're getting their job done in 3 hours instead of 6 hours, as much as on the surface I might be saying I'm fine with that, I see a lot of leaders who are behind the curtain say, well, I'm not fine with that, because if they can get it done in 3 hours, let's get them to do twice as much.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And again, I think there's some legitimacy to that argument. I read an article about a guy a few years ago, and this is like the quintessential example of what you're talking about, right? So he was a programmer. He's more like a system administrator for a bunch of systems, IT systems. And, he got the job, and he had to maintain all these IT systems, mostly the software in these IT systems. And so he wrote a bunch of scripts, computer scripts, to basically do his job. So he basically automated what he was doing, right? And he worked there for like 2 or 3 years before somebody figured out this guy's not actually doing anything. He just hits a button every morning, and all these automated scripts do his job for him. And they ended up firing the guy. So that's maybe like the most extreme example of that. But then you have to ask yourself, wow, I mean, if this guy's smart enough to automate his own job, think about what he could be doing in other elements of your business, right? Like it'd be idiotic to fire someone like that. You should go to that and go, hey, can you help me automate a whole bunch of other jobs to improve everybody's productivity, right? So it's that mentality of, there's this certain amount of labor that gets involved in a task, and those tasks get completed and so on and so forth. And people feel like, if people aren't working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that they're not doing their jobs. And I think, again, that's that focus on output over outcomes. And it's funny. I was on the phone with my sales team this morning. I was on a Zoom call with them. And, I said, guys, look, nobody cares what you're doing if you're hitting your numbers and exceeding your numbers. Okay. If you're exceeding your sales targets, like I don't really care what you're doing. Because you're doing it.
But you don't care. Like you as the president in this company don't care. But I do see a lot of presidents or leaders at various levels who will say that, but then they're wondering, what are they doing? What are they doing? Well, if they can hit these numbers, why can't they hit more numbers? Are they, you know what I mean? So it's, I think I think you're. I don't know how unique. Well, you're very unique, Alex. I don't know how unique that is, because I see what's stated, and then behind it again is this. I don't have a better description for it. It's this nervousness that something may not hit. I mean, and I know for me, a lot of times I am advising leaders. While you have to be careful and you can't, have team meetings every 10 minutes and looking at, sales calls and looking at all these inputs just to make you feel better because you disrupt the workflow, you can increase that a little bit as long as it's not disruptive to people, so that you get to see what's happening. And it's not, if you will, just a pre-post test. And that way you don't feel like you're in the dark. Whereas, and again, some of this argument is so ridiculous, because the same idea, well, just because you can see your people in the office, like see them, you don't know if they're working or not. You just see them. Like you don't know what they're doing just because you see their faces.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just kind of an old school mentality. Right. And I get it. I get that. Cause I kind of had the first, that reaction at first as well. I mean, cause we went fully remote for 26 months. During the pandemic. And that was very natural to me, because I've spent the vast majority of my career working remotely. So to me, working remotely is second nature. You have to have self-discipline. You have to have the right tools. You got to have the right setup to do it. And you've got to have the right mindset to doing it. But, study after study has shown that in the vast majority of cases, remote workers have turned out to be more productive than they were prior to going remote. So I think that the data tells us that these fears everybody has are largely unfounded. I'm sure there's little pockets of situations where, maybe they're not as productive, or maybe they're just messing around doing whatever. But I think the overwhelming scientific data that we have on this, as well as, a lot of anecdotal data, says that, actually people are pretty productive when they're working remotely. I mean, I know that I'm more productive in a lot of ways when I'm remote, because I don't have to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours in my car every day commuting back and forth to an office. Right. So I think there's that piece of it. Right. And I think you'll always have people that are concerned about, I want to be able to see my people. And I think that's just kind of a generational thing, honestly. People that have spent their whole careers as executives working in an office, they just feel uncomfortable with it. They have this, you're right, they have this fear of the unknown happening there. But again, I think it all goes back to making sure that, you've got the right outcome metrics. And, you probably also want to have some output metrics, but you don't want to confuse the two, right? You don't want to confuse working with actually getting stuff done. Because those are two different things. And some people are just much more productive than other people at the very same task. So you just have to take that into consideration.
Let me throw one more in there, because I was thinking about this, because I want to make sure we get to this other email. There's another one that comes up a lot that I see, which is, and I don't see this so much from leaders themselves, some, but it's really the whole employee base, which is communication breakdown. Oh, there you go. Communication breakdown. Oh, so I knew I was going to get.
Oh, we worked Led Zeppelin into this episode.
I know, but now I'm doing it unconsciously. Communication breakdown where people are feeling disconnected because the one part that you really can't replicate, or it's difficult to replicate, is that bumping into people, just dropping into their office. And as disruptive as that can be, when you remove it or you're in hybrid working, that has to be, frankly, intentional. And I literally, Alex, find myself advising companies to have meetings, either have meetings where the first few minutes are designed essentially for small talk. Hey, what's up? What's going on? What's everybody doing? Forget about work. Or literally, I've had this where I'm advising people, look, if you want to reach out to somebody just to bounce some ideas off them, like you would step into their office, you can Slack message them, you can text them, you can ask them to get on a 10-minute Zoom call just to say hi. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but it does sometimes fulfill that human need for somewhat spontaneous interaction. And I do see a lot of people throw their hands, oh, you can't do that. Well, why not? Why not? I can see you. I can hear you. It's just that you're not on my agenda. But if you've got some free time, why not? What are your thoughts about that?
No, I love that idea. And I wish I'd thought of it sooner.
You can call me anytime. I
need some consulting from you, man. No, but I think that's really important, because you do lose that, what I'll call sort of ad hoc collaborative element, when you're fully remote. And so, at Adaptogen, we really looked at it and we said, you know what, we're not going to go back into the office 5 days a week, because I think we'd be less productive doing that. But what we are doing is we're going in 2 days a week, and we kind of space them out. We go in every Tuesday and Thursday. And there's a couple of elements to it, right? One is, what I've told everybody is, look, Tuesdays and Thursdays, what I want you to focus your time on is collaboration. Like, focus on the tasks and the meetings and so on and so forth that you need to have a highly collaborative element for, and schedule those on Tuesdays and Thursdays whenever possible. So, if you need to do a whiteboarding session with, a couple of members of your team, and you'd like to do it on Monday, but you're going to do it on a virtual whiteboard or whatever, save it for Tuesday, right? It may cost you a day, but at the same time, I think you get much, much better collaboration when you intentionally focus that time in the office on collaboration and doing things that really require the bandwidth that you're going to get from a face-to-face meeting, right? Because let's face it, remote meetings are great. We've all gotten used to them, but I think they're lower bandwidth. It's hard to get up on a whiteboard and say, no, what if we did this? And and then another guy picks up another color and says, no, but if we did this. So you lose that element. So that's one thing that we've done. And I think it's working pretty well. The other thing we've done is, we've also encouraged people to stay in the office when they're there. So for instance, we have an office that's not particularly near any good places for lunch, right? You got to get in your car and you got to drive for a few minutes to get to something. So every Tuesday and Thursday, we just bring lunch in. We have it catered, and some days it's pizza, some days it's Mexican food, some days it's Thai or whatever. But we bring that in, and then what I've asked everybody to do is, instead of taking the food and going back to your office and working, we have an area where we can all sit down and have lunch together. And that's proven amazing, even for me, just going in and half the time I don't really have time to do this stuff, but I make the time to do it very specifically to sit around and shoot the breeze with these guys, because, the things that you find out about people and the connections that you make during an event like that are sometimes tremendous. Sometimes, they're it's just small talk, just chat or whatever. But sometimes you actually, not only do you learn more about the people, you learn more about what they're doing, the obstacles they're facing, the insights that they have, but it does it in a way where it's not like, okay, make me a PowerPoint deck and come present to me what you're doing. You can find those things out in a much more collaborative fashion. So we've really put an emphasis on doing that. And then, the other thing that we've done is, when the pandemic first started and we went fully remote, we've had weekly all hands calls, which is something we did like once a month or once a quarter before the pandemic. And we said, no, every Friday, we're going to get together on Zoom and, or Teams or whatever. And we're going to have just a talk. And like you said, like the first 5 to 10 minutes of that are people talking about, oh, did you see the new Star Trek episode? Or
Yes.
did you, whatever. And like that, even that type of interaction is amazingly useful. People tell stories about, what do you got coming up for the weekend? So I think having that sort of ad hoc collaboration, even virtually, but allocating that time to where when I get on these calls, I just kind of shut up and listen to people chatter. And it's great. And we spend 5 to 10 minutes doing that every single meeting. And it has nothing to do with work most of the time, but it creates that sense of a team. It creates that sense of a belonging. So that's another thing that we did to facilitate the process.
So let me take this, because there's so many tangents and tentacles that we can go on this one. Because for this person, again, when you use the word hybrid, particularly right now, everybody's thinking, okay, I have to have a protocol. There's hybrid consultants, and there's scheduling. And like you said, everyone's going to be in the office on Tuesday. Well, what if somebody doesn't come on Tuesday? And there's definitely some social norms that have to be adjusted. And one of the things I would say to, to our listener who's asking about this is, we've been talking about the different ways that you can structure this, the different metrics that you can look at. I think you do have to be very intentional about communication. And what I mean by that is your point that you just made, which is, God, I don't have time for small talk. I really don't. I'm booked back to back to back to back. I'm going to take my lunch into my little cave, right? Because even if I'm going to come face to face, I'm still going to try to maximize my efficiency. And I think one of the things that gets people nervous about hybrid is what we said is, I'm not going to maximize my efficiency. But the reality is, in a work setting, in a daily work effort, you do have to factor in these human factors as part of work. It's probably the hardest thing that I have to try to convince execs of, which is, look, your folks are going to be on social media. You can shut social media down. That's fine if you have security issues or whatever. But your folks are going to stare off into space. They are going to take a snack. They are going to take a mental break. And there's this, once we move to hybrid and people working remotely, there was this assumption that we have to catch them, if you will, doing that versus that is part of their operating procedure. You can't engineer that out, because once you do, now you start decreasing the productivity of the person. They have to be able to space out. They have to be able to have small talk. They have to be able to shoot the shit or take a call from their kids. And I think that, that's always frowned upon, always historically been frowned upon. But now it's almost as if, because it's quote hybrid and we can't see them, we have to watch it even more closely. And so my message always is, you have to take the human part of it as part of how they're productive. And I think that some of the examples that you gave are making people do all the way down to, lastly, all the way down to, I don't know if you all do this. When you have a video meeting, cameras on, cameras off, or optional, which one do you do?
Generally it's cameras on.
Okay.
But some people I'll get on calls every once in a while and I'll say, hey guys, I'm eating lunch here. So nobody wants to watch me eat lunch. I'm having fajitas for lunch or whatever, something really messy. Cool. None of you want me to do that, but we try to do cameras on because it increases the bandwidth of the conversation, right? You get all those nonverbal cues, you get confused looks on people's faces that you're just not going to detect over the phone or, with cameras off. So I think that's an important aspect to it. And, some people are a little camera shy, but I think most people have gotten used to it over time. But, talking about going back and going back to your point about this idea of, the fact that people are going to take breaks and they're going to go look at Facebook or whatever, that's, you're right. That's a really healthy part of the equation. And what I found is that just personally, if I'm working on a really hard problem where I don't know the answer and there may not even be an answer, I'll work on it for a while. And I'll get on my whiteboard here at home or in the office. And I just use my whiteboard. Most people use it to track tasks or something, but I use it to brainstorm with myself. I'll draw pictures and go, nah, that's not going to work. But what I find is that when I hit a point where I just feel like I'm not making any more progress, I don't just sit there and try to do more of it. I'll go do something completely different for a while. Like I'll go talk to my 5-year-old son. You get a whole different perspective on life when you talk to a 5-year-old boy. Let me tell you. Right. And so being able to take those breaks, take those mental breaks, and do that actually helps me get to the solution faster than if I sat there and tried to brute force it. So I think it kind of depends on the context of what you're trying to do, but I completely agree with you. Giving people the time to do that, giving people the time, because, it's particularly true in knowledge workers. I mean, if you're working in a factory and you're assembling, cars or something, maybe it's not as important. I don't know. But certainly in the knowledge worker space, being able to take those breaks, look at a problem from a different angle or at a different point in time, can be super helpful. So you're right. That's part of the productivity process, but working harder at a problem doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the result faster.
I just want to let everyone know you are listening to Adaptive Parish on Tony Kurre Radio. I'm Josh Klapow along with Dr. Alex Heublein, and you can email us. You can email us your questions just as these folks did today. Email us. I think I may have made a mistake in the email. The last time I talked about it, it is info@Tony Kurre Radio. That's Tony Kurre Radio, 2 R's, .net. info@TonyKurreRadio.net. Let me ask you the last question on the hybrid, because this is one that this hybrid question is one that I've seen a lot of companies struggle with. And I do see where the consultants sort of need to come in on this hybrid question. So on hybrid schedules, you definitely have situations in maybe slightly larger companies where everybody isn't in the office on the same day, or there are varying schedules and not everybody is scheduled to be there on the same day, or not everybody can. Okay. I see a healthy and an unhealthy approach to that. The healthy approach is if we're having a meeting and there are people sort of remote, because we're hybrid, then they are included in the meeting if it's appropriate for them to be included. I also see the unhealthy approach, which is they were supposed to be here. They're not here. We know why they're not here. And so, we're not going to include them in the meeting, or they weren't supposed to be here. We're not going to say a word. And since, they choose not to be here, we're not going to include them. I mean, I see that a ton of times. I don't know if you see that. And as a president of a company, I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's definitely healthier approaches than others. And we certainly see it. What we've tried to do is make sure that, everybody's in the office on the same 2 days. And what we've asked people to do, and we've asked them, we're not mandating anything. We just said, look, try to schedule your other stuff around those 2 days, right? So if you've got a dentist, you're going to schedule a dentist appointment or whatever, try to do it on a Wednesday or a Friday or a Monday or whatever, right? And again, it's not like we enforce that or anything, but we just ask people, hey, this is kind of our 2 days a week that we can collaborate and be together. So if at all possible, maybe try to schedule some of your personal activities that you need to go do, some of your life activities, try to schedule them around it. So I think that, that's one approach, but certainly not something we mandate. It's not like you must be in the office. I think that gets very unhealthy. But I think, but we have fully remote people as well, right? So we have people here in Atlanta that come into our office on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then we have people that are just permanently remote. They live somewhere else. We have salespeople that are in, other states. So the idea is we do try to be very inclusive when we have these meetings, whether you're there in person or you're remote. We've got the technology and the conference room set up to where we can pipe those people in. And, is it as productive as having everybody in the room? Probably not. But I think including them and having those inclusive conversations is really important rather than trying to exclude people just because they're remote. I think that's a recipe for disaster.
All right. So last question on that one, because I was just thinking, this person who sent us the email. They said they're a small business owner. I don't know how small, but I do see a lot of companies who, again, are more than a few people. So these, 10, 20 people. They will say, yes, we have access to Teams or Zoom or what have you. But we don't have the awesome setup, the great video cameras, and things are freezing and, and Wi-Fi issues and all those kinds of things. And because of that, we feel like the technological limitations are keeping us from really being productive in this hybrid world where we may need to be hybrid. We're basically saying that technology is not allowing us to do what we need to do. I call BS on that. I think it's a cop-out. But again, I'm not a technology company president of a technology company, but I call BS on that because again, if you're talking about the need to look at somebody or communicate with somebody, you don't need a ton of fancy technology, but educate me. I mean, like maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm missing something, but I usually see that as a defense mechanism. More so than a legitimate, we don't have the technology to do things remotely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might have been a valid excuse 2 years ago when the pandemic started. But I don't think that's a particularly valid excuse these days. The technologies have come along pretty well. But I think as a company, you have to, and I think a lot of companies did this, but some of them didn't do a very good job of this, is, invest in the technology, invest in the things that your remote workers or your hybrid workers need to work remotely, right? So when we went remote, we told all of our guys, that had these big monitors or multi-monitor setups in the office, just take them home, right? Just take all that stuff home. And so when we came back to a hybrid approach, we said, just keep them at home. We know you're going to be working there 3 days a week and we'll just buy new ones for you, right? We bought, like 50 new monitors and, cameras and all that good stuff. So, it wasn't a situation where they had to go decide, what technology needs to be where. We duplicated it all and we made the investment in doing that. And so I think that's the important thing, is that companies have to realize if you're going to have a hybrid work model, you got to spend a little bit of money to give your people the technology to make them more productive in their remote environments as well as when they're in your office environment. That's
great. All right, we ran out of time on one question, so we definitely.
Oh my goodness. Was that one question?
That was one question. So we definitely will cover the other questions that we got on future episodes of Adapt or Perish. A couple things to remember. You can email us if you've got questions for Dr. Heublein or myself, or anything that we're talking about on the show, or things you want to hear. Please remember to email us. You can email us at info@tonycurryradio.net. That's info@tonycurryradio.net. Thank you, everyone, for watching us. Look at us watching. I can see you.
I hope they're not watching.
I know my screen is not turned on. You can't see me. No, thank you for listening to Adapt or Perish. Please stay tuned to Tony Curry Radio, because that's where you're going to hear the next killer episode of Adapt or Perish.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.